Cliff Nelson, welcome to Acquiring Minds.
Thanks for having me, Will.
Cliff, you went through the two babies at once experience. You closed on a business, baby number one, within days of your actual child being born, baby number two. This timing took a toll on you and your wife, which is where we're going to spend time today. And we're also going to hear directly from your wife, Christine, about this whole experience for her perspective as a searcher's partner. To get you and me started, Cliff, why did you decide that you wanted to acquire a business in the first place?
It's a long answer. I'll try to keep it short. We actually have up in the other room, pegboard with letters that we put up during COVID. And it's a quote from Jack Welch that says, if you don't control your own destiny, someone else will. And there's lots of individual reasons why I like running a business, but that's really what it was about for me, is controlling my destiny.
And how old were you, and kind of where were you in your career, and what was the kind of final catalyst or the initial catalyst? I mean, what was the moment that you really decided to go do it?
Yeah. So in my career, I spent almost a decade working for entrepreneurs. So I was a consultant in an entrepreneurial practice that had been acquired. I worked for a serial entrepreneur founder in a PE and VC-backed business. And then I had also been in a entrepreneurial, investment firm doing private equity investing. And, I got sick of, looking from the sidelines and cheering on, and sick of, doing all this work and accruing equity value elsewhere. So it's kind of that mix of, I'd say, young enough to still take some risks. I think I was 28 when I took the leap, but experienced enough that I felt like I could actually do it.
One other thing I remember from the pre-call, Cliff, that I wanted you to just touch on was you knew about the search fund concept, buying a business concept, but it took you a while to feel ready.
Yes.
When you finally did it, that was part of it, was that you felt ready. Say more about that, even though to some people's ears, it might be a little discouraging. I'll elaborate,
sure.
But go ahead first.
Yeah, so I first learned about search funds, I think it was 2014. I had just started business school at University of Chicago. I was an evening weekend student, and I was only 2 years out of school. So I had 2 years of full-time consulting work, but that's it. And I remember the light bulb, like that's the thing I really want to do. It's like the ultimate capstone to being in business school, control your destiny, all those things. But I thought through each of the steps of what it takes. And, I had never raised money from anybody, or really I'd never sold anything, period. I'd never gone and looked for or scouted opportunities. I'd never been involved in a transaction. I'd never managed somebody. So I really felt like if I had tried to do it then, I would have been set up for failure. And if I did fail, unlike people who do it with a bit more experience, I'm falling back on 2 years of entry-level consulting experience.
Well, the reason why that might be discouraging to some people is because they still don't have those, they still haven't done deal sourcing or have a lot of the experiences that you just talked about gaining for yourself over the subsequent years. And yet they want to do this path, or they already have. So it's one of these where I guess I wanted to have you reflect, now that you've done the entire thing, you haven't sold the business, you're in the business. Do you look at people who don't have much experience who are trying to embark on this path and scratch your head? Or are you just somebody who really wants to know that they're prepared? Or reconcile this for me?
If you're going to pick one or the other, like pre-close or post-close, experience managing people or being in operations, way more valuable. Like you need enough on the sourcing and deal side to get a deal done, but the hard part comes after.
I guess we'll hear about that.
Yes, we will. It was hard for me throughout. I haven't caught a break, but
okay.
Still loving it.
And so what year was it that you decided to do your search, and what did the shape of your search look like? Yes.
So the final decision was right around December 2019. And it was that year-end inventory. I think I had revisited, and I probably could dig up the journal somewhere, like the 5-year plan. Everyone had search as the number 2 option if the default plan doesn't work. And finally, that assessment end of 2019, I was like, well, it seems a lot more feasible. I still like it. In fact, I like it more than my current path. Maybe I should do this. Had the conversation with Christine, obviously, before doing it. We can get into some of the quirks there. Pulled the ripcord and quit my job February 2020, which people now will know was, hilariously bad timing. The world fell apart weeks after I made that decision. Searched for over 2 years before finally closing. And it was a traditional search. I don't think I said that.
And why did you choose traditional?
That's purely the risk aversion side. I still felt like even with, some experience at each stage, I would really benefit from the mentorship and the closeness of that community. And then also just from a personal finance standpoint, I didn't want to go burn down everything that I'd built up at that point through both the search and putting all my eggs in one basket with an acquisition.
In other words, you didn't want to forego a salary while you searched.
Correct.
Plus all the costs of a search.
That's right.
And you didn't want to have to take a personal guarantee once you found the business.
All of the above. Yep.
Okay. These quirks related to talking to Christine, what do you mean?
I think when I first told her about this path, she thought I made it up. Because it sounds ridiculous if you're not coming from this world. Like, yeah, I'm going to go raise like $500,000 from people who, don't know me yet. They'll get to know me, and they're going to let me go basically job hunt for 2 years, maybe more. And then they're going to give me millions of dollars after that to go be CEO when the biggest team I've ever managed was like 3.5 people. That sounds silly.
Yeah.
And so to get her there with it, by that point at Booth, I was out of school, but they had a class, they had a club. I actually had friends who had graduated around my cohort who had gone and bought businesses and were operating. So I could at least point and be like, see, look, you've met him, he's done it. I can do it too.
It's one thing for a partner to feel like this doesn't sound real or sound silly. But sure, was that her perspective? Sure, just go ahead and do it. Or was this really something where you needed to sell her and convince her?
I think I don't feel like I had to sell her and convince her. She might say something different, but I mentioned that it had been on my mind, for 5 years, and she wasn't in the picture back in 2014 when I first learned about it. But for as long as she and I knew each other, this was something I was thinking about. We had also just gotten married, in October of that year, and so it was the pitch for me was, we don't have a family yet. We're still flexible where we end up. We have low spend. We can manage through this. It's only going to get harder as we get older.
We don't have a family yet piece of this, of course, will play a big role. But as we know, traditional search, often investors expect you to be willing to move anywhere. Mm-hmm. We also know that, in fact, most traditional searchers don't move across the country. Most of them end up buying something more regional than that, closer to where they currently live. But still, it's a possibility, and actually a likely possibility that you'll move somewhere. Yeah. Was that a factor in your conversations with her?
It was. I think it was a smaller factor then than it probably should have been. Her family lives up in central Wisconsin, so they were about a 3-hour drive away. So we were used to not having her family right there. My family was generally around the Chicago area, but I've got siblings now that have spread out. So we weren't as worried about that. There was the concern of, well, what if we end up in some podunk place where we're not going to be happy? And for that, my pitch, which it's what I truly believed, I maybe would change my mind now. But I basically said, that the chances of finding a business that is 1 to 5 million of EBITDA that I can double or triple in a reasonable time frame in the middle of nowhere, that's a lot lower than finding it near, maybe not a first tier city, but certainly a second tier, market we could get comfortable with.
Fascinating. In the interest of time, we're not going to hear about all of the twists and turns of the search. Mm-hmm. except for one feature actually on this topic of moving, a business you didn't buy was in Shreveport, Louisiana, right?
Yes. Yes.
Is there something there to share with the audience? You'd actually mentioned that to me in your email, but we never talked about it in the pre-call.
Yeah. So for people who don't know where Shreveport is, it's like the northwest part of Louisiana. It is like deep south. It's right next to Arkansas, right by Texas. I wouldn't have even considered Louisiana, except I'd gone to school in New Orleans, so I had a little bit of experience there. But broad-based, geographically agnostic search, that's where one happened to hit. And it was a good business. It was a nice security systems integration company, growing really quickly. They had good core customers. I really gelled with the owner. But when we went down together to visit, we had a really nice, dinner with the owner and his wife, and I went to do the business thing during the day. And I remember coming back from that and saying it went really well. And Christine broke down crying in the hotel room. Actually, I think it might have happened 2 times at the hotel, and when we went out to dinner, because she's like, oh crap, I can't see myself living here. Plenty of things about living in the Deep South that didn't jive with her, including the heat. She's not she's a Wisconsin girl, so 98 degrees, and it's not middle of nowhere really, but it felt middle of nowhere compared to what we're used to. So that was tough to work through. And I guess fortunately, unfortunately, it didn't work out for business reasons. I think if that, letter of intent I submitted had been accepted, we would have had some reckoning or some things to work through.
Yeah. I didn't preface our conversation because I'll probably mention it in the intro, but I'll just say it here as well. Part of the reason we're talking, Cliff, you had reached out to me because you want the audience to hear just how intertwined, to use your word, perfect word, the professional and the personal are when it comes to a search, at least in your story. Not every story, but in many stories, and certainly many more stories where a partner or spouse is involved, and in your case, in a huge way. So that's the theme of this conversation, and one we're going to keep returning to. Yeah,
and I run a mental health business now. We haven't even gotten into the nuts and bolts of the business, but 2 years into being CEO of a mental health company, I've had to spend a lot of time reflecting on my own mental health journey through this whole search, because it's challenging. There has been lots of ink spilled, lots of podcasts about the grit it takes from a searcher or entrepreneur, but a lot less said about the grit that you're basically asking your partner to go through. Like all those ups and downs are shared. All of the risk is shared. So really, they're entrepreneurs too in this. And I think that's important for prospective searchers to know.
It's such an important point. And as I shared with you in the pre-call, Cliff, I get inbound a lot from people on this point, that there's clearly an appetite for hearing the partner perspective of somebody doing a search. And to that point, Rick and Royce, who wrote the HBR guide, do a Zoom call for their students' partners, where they have a panel. They get 2 or 3 partners of people who have searched to answer the questions of the partners of other students or prospective searchers who are considering this path. So it's just all about the partners talking to each other, like, what is this whole search thing about that my partner is considering doing? And dozens of people come. So it's a thing.
Yeah.
And it's not one that has gotten very much attention.
I wonder if they measure the outcomes, because I'd love to know how many potential searches die because of that. But then also, you would never be able to know, but how many marriages saved as a result? Because I know a couple examples personally, and I know a few through reputation where, somebody bought a business and, the business not going well and the marriage not going well happened in parallel. And not to say you can avoid that in every case. Sometimes things don't work out, both in business and in life. But I wonder if some look before leaping could save some of those situations.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great idea for them to do.
In the interest of time, I want to basically focus on the key plot points related to your search and acquisition and Christine and the baby's role and all of that. And then, of course, I want to make sure we have time to hear about the business itself.
Yeah.
So let's do it in that order. Why don't you kind of guide me here? Where do you think is the most important plot point for us to pick up the story?
Yeah, I think overall with the search, like there were really, I'd say, three big tests, both personally and from the relationship side. I've alluded to COVID. Like I still so vividly remember, like both of us had just gotten comfortable committing. I quit my job. We were having dinner before I went to the airport to go to the Bay Area to pitch people, and ping, ping, ping on my phone. Everyone canceled, and they said, nobody's buying a business for 6 months. You haven't quit your job already. You should probably go. Don't do that. I'm like, well, too late. I burned the boats like you told me to. So that's like the first.
This is what controlling my destiny looks like.
Yeah, oops.
It sucks.
The second one, I'll lump a lot together, but it's like the ups and downs of, will I, won't I on this particular business? And for me, the big down was like end of 2021. I'm well into the search. Like I'm feeling like I should be closing something soon, and the Shreveport one fell through. I had one that I was really excited about, a much bigger deal, where I got scooped by a private equity firm. And I had a third that actually went under LOI, but then the seller failed the background check. So it's like I went from full pipeline, I'm like, I'm going to close on one of these for sure, to nothing, right in time to go see everybody for the holidays to ask, hey, what have you been doing for the last couple of years? And then the third one, which you've alluded to already, is the actual closing. We, in this whole thing of searching, decided, man, life's short, COVID's a thing. We can't control the timing of the search, so let's start a family now. And worst thing that could happen is, we happen to close a deal and have a baby at the same time. But the chances are astronomically small. That'll never happen. And it did. Like the deal, I got the business under LOI in spring of 2022, thinking I've got plenty of time before this baby comes in November. I did not. It dragged on. And, the timeline as we got into closing was November 1st due date. Business closed November 4th. Baby was born November 9th. And in between, there was a lot of stuff that happened. So it was the worst case scenario that we thought could happen in terms of closing.
Wow. So let's hear about that, because that is really where things get quite tense. So maybe first tell us about the business that you bought.
Yeah. So it's called Psychogeriatric Services. That's a mouthful.
Psychogeriatric Services.
Yes. The
Go ahead.
PGS, less of a mouthful.
PGS.
And what we do is we provide mental and behavioral health services to residents of nursing homes and other long-term care facilities. We see about actually over 30,000 patients a year. And right now we've got about 120 clinicians between Maryland, DC, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. It's really, I couldn't have found a better business from a mission standpoint, because universally, when I tell people what we do, they think of somebody they know, because everybody has an experience with an aging relative who has cognitive decline or goes into a nursing home and feels isolated, maybe depressed. And for the people that are taking care of medical issues in a nursing home, they don't have the time or expertise to take care of the mental side.
Yeah.
And then the family's not equipped to do it either. So it really is this critical service that is really underserved for this population.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I feel like I have personal window into that. Who's the payer?
So it's primarily Medicare and Medicaid, and then private insurance. So it's an interesting dynamic, because the facilities need it, but they don't pay. So it makes the pitch really nice. Of course, we have competition we're fighting up against, but it's nice to not have any pricing pressure from your customers. The downside is we can't raise prices, even if we're doing a great job.
And so the day to day is, this is it's not a staffing business.
This is a point of debate, and we change the view in the boardroom all the time. Like, in some ways, we are a staffing business because it's a core activity to find people to fill a position. But there's so much more that we have to do behind the scenes to support the people we found. It's depending who you ask, you might say, oh, it's a staffing business with some extra services, or how I feel about it is it's a care delivery business where staffing is a really important core competency. Because day to day, you can kind of picture very typical nursing home would be 100 beds or 100 people that live there. That's enough work for one psych nurse practitioner to go make rounds once a week, managing people's medications, meaning if they have new behaviors or new symptoms, adding medications or adjusting to address that. If they're stable, we also want to reduce the medications they're on to the minimum effective level. That reduces side effects. It improves the overall health of the patients. So that's it's kind of one day a week. So you can figure 5 facilities for one nurse practitioner. We also have psychotherapists, and it's kind of a similar model, although the ratio is a bit different.
And so as you said, a lot of this is a new patient needs to be assigned a new a therapist, and so you're doing that. Of course, you're growing the business, so you're talking to new facilities, and then you're also supporting these therapists, clinicians on the back end.
Correct. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on the back end stuff, it's everything. It's billing, training, clinical quality management, IT, HR support. It's a lot more than just hiring somebody and placing them somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, great. Wow. From the mission perspective, like you, I really like the business. Of course, the dynamics of the business, the model of the business seems attractive because although to state the obvious, there's a recurring component to this.
Yep.
Who the payer is, as you said, is kind of great. It's kind of an easy sell. Of course, you don't have much. You can't raise prices very much, I guess, would be one of the weaknesses.
At all. Yeah.
At all. On the other hand, I hate to talk about this so clinically, but are mental health services a nice to have or a need to have by the facilities?
It is actually a need to have. So first from a moral ethical standpoint, if somebody is going into a nursing home, they're obligated to provide care for all of their needs. You can't take somebody with a mental health issue and then not treat it. So that's important. From a regulatory standpoint, nursing homes, if people don't know, are very, very heavily regulated. If you look back over the history, there's instances of abuse at nursing homes. There's instances of, medications being given to zonk people out so that they're easier to care for. And this is over the last several decades. The regulatory response has been really rigorous measuring of different metrics and really rigorous health inspections to make sure they're doing the right thing for patients. So things that we address in the facilities would be the percentage of residents on antipsychotics. We want that low. Those are dangerous medications that should only be given as a last resort. The percentage of residents that are showing symptoms of depression, because if they come with depression, you want to control or manage that, whether it's medication or behavioral. Same thing with categories like anxiolytics, hypnotic drugs. That's the type of thing that we manage for the facilities. And then similarly, when the health inspectors come through, if they see that a patient, resident has had a behavioral issue that causes a danger to them or, significant distress, if that goes untreated, or if it gets treated with medication before considering other avenues, that can be, in extreme cases, considered a form of abuse. Because you're either giving an unnecessary med or you're neglecting to treat somebody.
Great. Thank you for that. And then the size of the business and a little bit of its history. Size first.
Yeah. So when we acquired the business, it was just north of 15 million of revenue. We were running at about 20% margins, depending on how you look at it. I think there's a big asterisk there for a lot of search acquired healthcare businesses, but also more broadly. that's the margin you can get if you're running really, really lean. And, like the owner, the psychiatrist was wearing a million hats that I can't wear, including clinically. So steady state's a bit lower than that.
Well, Cliff,
yeah,
everybody, that's the case.
That's the J curve, right? So I say that, and people think, oh man, that's how much money is coming through. It's not like that once you start investing.
But a business of this size, 15 million, I would imagine that you could hire a couple more people to absorb the additional work of the exiting owner, and it wouldn't move the margins that much, because that 15 million is a big business for search.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, for search, it is a good size business. I think I would say as a general rule for most, if you're comparing healthcare provider businesses to, a widget company at the same level of revenue, there's generally less infrastructure for the healthcare business than there would be for the manufacturing business.
Okay.
So it's so people intensive to manage. There's not the same scale effect or leverage you can get in a widget business.
So peopling the business to absorb the exiting sellers, what he was doing is, maybe I'm underestimating it. There was like a lot of hiring that needed to happen, basically.
Yeah. Oh, and I underestimated it too.
Okay.
If I could rewind, I would have estimated it better.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, just to do the obvious math for everybody, and taking into account that you said that the margins dipped after you bought it, J curve, 20% margins on $15 million in revenue. That's a nice $3 million EBITDA business. So quite, that's a big one. And you did a traditional search. So this is the sort of business that a traditional search enables. We should also note that self-funded searchers are going to have a much harder time getting their hands on a business like this. And number of people or bodies, understanding that the people you place are they employees? What's the structure there, and how many people are in this business?
That's a can of worms we should not go into. But yeah, okay. when we came in, there were about 100 providers, and then roughly 25 people on the administrative side. The providers, that's a mix of full-time, part-time. So the FTEs is much lower than that. And at the time, it was a pretty healthy mix of 1099s. It was majority employees, but there were a lot of contractors. At this point, we've pretty much shifted away from that to almost exclusively employees.
And so what's the number of people that you would consider employees today?
So total today, it's about 150, including both providers and admin staff.
Again, another metric that suggests a pretty big business. Not many of my guests have 150 people on their employ.
Yeah, it's actually, it's a fun size, because it is big enough that, if we have facility needs change or have somebody quit, we can cover in most areas pretty reasonably. But it's not so big that I don't have a connection to the vast majority of the staff. Every time we start a new employee, I'm the first person they meet day one. We do it virtually. That's really fun. And at this size, you could give me the name of an employee and I know, who they are, where they're located, what they do. I could probably give you some of the facilities they're going to. Talk to me in a couple of years. At 300 people, maybe that breaches my brain capacity.
Anything else to say about this business that is not obvious that the listener should know?
No, I think we covered the big high points.
Okay, great. Okay, you find this. Where is the business?
Yeah, we're based in Silver Spring, Maryland, so just outside of DC. And then I mentioned already, Maryland, DC, Virginia, Pennsylvania is the coverage area.
Okay, so business is in Silver Spring, not far from me. You were doing your search from Chicago, so we assume there's been a move there.
Yes.
Now I think we return to the plot. You close on the business. Your baby comes late by a few days.
Thankfully. Yeah.
Thankfully. And so actually you close on the business first, and then a few days later, the baby comes. Give us a picture. What's that like?
Yeah. So I'll go all the way back to signing the LOI, because that when it got signed, I did have the feeling this is the one, for a bunch of reasons. And I thought, that 90-day window, we're going to hit it. We're going to off to the races. But it was the very typical experience of, the seller hired an attorney who was primarily a real estate person. The seller's experience with business transactions was a smaller private practice and real estate. So he thought, okay, there's not a whole lot of diligence to do. That first request list comes in, and he's like, whoa, concerned. And so there was actually a lot of trust to build, education on the process. We did get them to ultimately hire a healthcare focused attorney who, smoothed things over a bit, but all that takes time and stretches out. So, I guess it would have been, beginning of October where it's like, now the clock's ticking. I'm 1 month out from the baby due date. And we had preemptive rights notice going out to investors. The bank term sheet was signed and they're, coalescing. And I just remember in the weeks leading up, every day waking up and rolling over to Christine and be like, don't go into labor today. Don't go into labor today. And I don't know if she listened. I don't know if Calvin, our son, listened, but that worked out. But it was a hindrance because normally, like, you can push these things over the finish line by getting there in person. I know plenty of people who, when they're in that home stretch, they fly out and they don't leave until the deal's done. I couldn't do that. I couldn't fly at all because I'm not missing the birth of one of my children for a deal. The due date passed. We got past November 1st, and everybody on the whole deal team knows this. So every call, they're like, "Thank goodness you're here." And we ended up closing, Friday, November 4th, late in the day, of course, because they never close early in the day. And I fully expected or was prepared for Christine to go into labor over the weekend, and like, can I even announce this to the team before this happens? Fortunately, that didn't. And so we did 2 virtual announcements on Monday. I remember telling my seller, make sure that the meeting invite is titled exciting announcement or something positive so people aren't worried. And I think he just said mandatory meeting. So like some of the context there was a very prominent bankruptcy and liquidation of one of our competitors in 2021. And a lot of my employees came from that. So
wow.
They see this and they're freaking out. Assuaged a lot of those concerns as much as you can in a 30-minute to an hour Teams meeting. And then, that was Monday. I think it was the Tuesday.
And Cliff, if Christine hadn't been so pregnant, would this meeting, this day one speech, have been in person? Would you have flown to Maryland and done it in person?
Good question. Certainly for the administrative staff, because they're all in Silver Spring. For the clinicians, it would have had to be virtual anyway. But of course, had she not been pregnant, I would have had the whole week to go make the rounds, meet people in person, all that. That wasn't there. So that the day after we announced to the team, the doctor said, you're going to be induced. So we went to the induction. It was a long labor, and he was born on the Wednesday morning, less than a week after we closed on the business.
Wow.
And then Thursdays are the big meeting day at PGS. We do all of our regional stuff. So from the recovery room in the hospital, I was on mute, no camera, listening to those meetings that Thursday, and kind of picked it up from there. And
okay, so I mean that's week one. Of course, that is the most kind of acute moment of a delivery. But anybody who's had a kid, especially the first kid, the kind of overwhelming nature of it continues for weeks and months.
Yeah.
So did it just settle down then, or what happened?
No.
How did you handle this first kind of month of what is your son's name? Calvin?
Calvin. Yep.
What Calvin's life?
There was no good answer. That this really felt like a no success scenario. It was survival mode. So the plan was for me to go out, to Maryland to be in person, for 1 or 2 days a week for kind of the indefinite future. And then, Christine kind of mustered resources of family for the days when I was going to be gone. So, over the next 3 weeks, first week I flew out, I think I was there 2 days overnight to meet with people, start learning the business. The next week I was out for a day trip where it was like the 5 a.m. flight, the 10 p.m. flight, because it was Thanksgiving that week. So yeah, in the middle of this, then we're going and traveling to Wisconsin to see family. We're like, congratulations, what the hell are you thinking?
Yeah.
And then, the third week I had one more visit. And I don't remember where in that 3 weeks we decided, or I should say, I pushed, like, we've got to move. I can't do this. Like, it was stressing me to feel like I'm not physically present in either, because I wasn't. I felt bad that I was asking, Chrissy as my spouse, my partner, to basically figure out how to be a parent without me, while she's also physically recovering, by the way. And so we made the decision. I think it was the week of Thanksgiving where I went and signed a lease, and we just picked a place, no scrutiny, wherever we can move. And then she got mastitis, which if people aren't familiar, that it's an infection, that happens. It can happen with breastfeeding, and was prescribed antibiotics and had a big allergic reaction, like hives head to toe from the allergy. So going into that third week, we had movers booked for the Friday. We had an apartment lease signed. I'm stressed to my hilt, like trying to fulfill both sides of my obligations. And the oh crap moment is, her saying, like, if this doesn't clear up, I can't move. The doctor said, don't do it. That was probably the toughest part of this whole journey, because it like I said, it's a no-win situation. Like, she feels like, we committed to do this. She made a commitment to me. We're both aligned that we're not going to do anything that puts her health at risk. But at the same time, like, I really, really didn't want the answer to be, we can't move. And the way it fortunately, played out is, a day and a half before the movers were set to come, the hives cleared up, the allergic reaction's gone. Doctor says you're okay to move. And then we did it. We packed up everything on that Friday. We drove through the night. Calvin was a champ, and, he woke up to feed at the rest stops along the turnpike. And, then we were here. But then it's still just, for 6 months, it's a blur. Everything from, living in our apartment on lawn furniture and air mattresses. The movers are delayed, of course. Even things like, Chrissy had to find doctors. She has, post-op or, post-delivery care. Calvin needs a doctor because he's got a million visits to go do. And then I was getting to the office at 5:30 in the morning so that I could make it home while Chrissy was still awake to help with the baby. And that was like the first 6 months. It all blurs together.
And that move to Maryland was going to happen. It just had to be pulled a lot forward, to be clear. This scramble
in an
to
ideal
move.
world, it would have happened, simultaneous with close, baby comes later or significantly before. But yeah, the plan when we realized they were going to converge was, we'll have to push the move out later than otherwise we would have.
Right.
But that wasn't a good plan.
Right. So it was January-ish. You were thinking you'd
something
move.
Like that. Yeah, we hadn't even specified.
And then because of this back and forth over the first 2 and 3 weeks of Calvin's life, the flying back and forth to Maryland, you realized that this wasn't tenable even until through January.
Exactly.
You needed to move now, basically.
That's right. Yep.
Wow. Okay, let's. I want to hear kind of about the the emotions of this. You've used the word stress. Maybe start us off with, how are you and Christine relating at this point?
Yeah, that's a good question. We never. It was never antagonistic. That's probably the only reason that we got through this, in good shape, is it was always collaborative. And I actually think it's kind of like the core entrepreneurial skill is figuring things out. Like, it's constant problem solving mode. We hear this from your guests all the time. And I think we both looked at this. It's another problem to solve, but the emotional side of it is, we both had made commitments to each other, and we were both in a position where, we were maybe going to have to break those commitments. Of course, the other one understood in all those cases, but it still is just a really difficult spot to be in. And I'd say for me, I actually had a board member had prepped me for this going, and he's like, you were going to feel like you're being a bad father and a bad CEO at the same time. And that's true. Like,
wait, this board member said that
before closing, because he knew the timeline and the convergence.
Okay.
And was prepping.
So this
me
wasn't
for that.
a blanket observation that he made about anybody with a kid.
He wasn't saying I was going to be that. Yeah, because it was at the same time.
To your situation.
Yeah. And I think my biggest stress and strain is like, I've got, the two most important people in the world to me in one part of the country with needs that I ought to fulfill. But then I've got over 100 people elsewhere, which, like, given this context of this prior bankruptcy of an unrelated business, and like they're all nervous and stressed and strained. It's a time of uncertainty. And I'm picturing all of them going home to their loved ones. Like, what does this mean for me? Is my job safe? Is it going to change? Like, and I want to solve both of those at the same time, which just isn't possible when they're in different places.
Well, and of course, as we know, regular listeners will know that first impression that you make is very delicate. And sometimes a searcher will make a bad first impression and recover, but sometimes they'll make a bad first impression and not recover. And there will be immediate attrition, or, all kinds of problems can flow from that. Not saying that you made a bad first impression, but you weren't delivering but you weren't delivering the impression that you would have choreographed in your ideal situation. I mean, you were.
Yeah, I think
or am I wrong?
I would say like the silver lining is you are never going to have a private equity overlord acquire the business and say, hold on, I've got to take care of my baby. Like it softens. I think it did have an impact of softening the message, because like, look, I'm a person too. We're in this together, and like, I think 2 years later, it's safe to say I've, whatever first impression, like we're through that. But culturally, it's really important to our practice and our providers that they have a lot of flexibility and autonomy. We have a ton of part-time people who they might be caring for an aging relative themselves, or, they value being able to drop their kids off at the bus stop, and they're flexible in when they can go into their assigned facilities. And so in a way, it's helped, like it reinforced that culture. Yeah. I'm a parent too. I have family obligations. Even as the CEO, I adjust my schedule to make it work. And I want the same flexibility for the team here.
How interesting. What a happy byproduct of this experience, that you were building culture and you didn't even realize it.
Yeah. I'm not sure I would have picked this as the way to build that culture, but it's the silver lining.
And how did you perceive that your wife was handling this period?
Not well.
Keeping in mind that we're going to hear from her directly here in a little bit.
She is very tough. We did not talk about this in the pre-call, but to give a sense of how tough she is, literally physically. But before we met, her appendix burst and she had to have surgery. And it started with her being like, "Oh, I think I've got a little stitch. Oh, maybe I exerted myself too much." And by the time she finally called and went to the hospital, like, "Oh, it has burst." Most people call days before this. So she's tough. But for anybody, putting myself in her shoes, it's like the uncertainty, like even up till the end, she knew the baby was coming. We all knew one way or another, the baby's here, but deals fall apart at the 11th hour all the time. So that's still uncertain until it's done. And then, she has her own career that is now uprooted. And so during her maternity leave, she knows she's not going back. And so it's like new family dynamic, new place to live, new job situation, no friends, no family support system locally. She started seeing a therapist. Like, I know she's comfortable with me sharing that, like, for obvious reasons that would strain anybody to the point where like they need somebody to talk to. Some days I feel like a therapist, a CEO, but I'm obviously not. And even if I was, I didn't have time to like really be there and work through these things. And even if I did, like, there's a reason therapists exist, because family's not the person to go to for some of these things. Mm-hmm. So it was tough.
At any point, did you question what you were doing?
Yeah, and I still do. I think anybody that tells you they're 100% sure is probably lying. Not questioning the what. Like I love the what, and back then even knew it was the right thing, but even going back to that beginning search moment, with COVID, like there's the what have I done? Like, oh my gosh, did I make a mistake committing to buy this business, knowing that there was a baby on the way? Like that doubt creeps in.
Let's close our conversation with just a little bit more on how it's gone these last 2 years. We talked a little bit about the J curve in our pre-call. Let's start there.
Yeah, that in one hyphenated word, that's how I would say it's gone. Is we're in the J curve. The biggest risks for this business going in, which everybody knew about, were it's people intensive, and that impacts both recruiting the people who do the work that bring in the money, also the administrative team, and being tied to government reimbursement rates. Those were like the two big things. Both of those have been a challenge. On the people side, the practice, the way it evolved over the 30 years it existed roughly before I joined, it was very doctor centric, and being provider centric, to be clear, is a very good thing, but everybody probably knows or has experiences with doctors not being great administrators. And we have some that are great administrators, but they've got a better, highest and best use for their time. And so the way it evolved was like individual fiefdoms for each doctor that when you're small, it works really well. They are so embedded. They know exactly what's going on in every facility. They were involved in the payer relationships and insurance. They were involved in HR decisions, IT, all those things. But that meant it's being done differently everywhere. And to go hire specialists to do that, to enable us to scale, that costs money. I mean, we took, as an example, before I joined, there was one person doing all of the recruiting and all of the HR for the practice. That's more than a one-person job. And so now we have two people on the recruiting team. We have an HR generalist and we have an HR support person. So we've gone from 1 to 4. That's not free to do. That's a big investment. And you can think about similar needs across every team. And it's really hard to balance, how quickly do you make that investment? We all want growth. The growth's not free. That's been the theme. It's really tough to balance that. And we're still clawing our way out of the J curve 2 years in, to be clear.
You knew to expect the J curve. So now that you're in it, though, just knowing intellectually it's coming, but being in it, that did that soften the blow, or is it really still? Because it's kind of like intellectually you can be like, yeah, I wish we were getting all those new earnings now, but we'll get there. This is just laying the foundation, and we'll get there.
I'd say that's like, that question is probably the biggest single source of anxiety in my seat is, I intellectually appreciated there's a J curve. I didn't model it the way I should have. I think searchers rarely do actually build it into their financial model. Investors, board members, they all know, and actually more than I do, they know intellectually and through experience that there's going to be a J curve. But it's part of their job to not let up. If they were telling me constantly, oh, don't worry, it's the J curve, you'll be fine, that's going to delay clawing my way out of it. And so I do have this, on both sides. Like, one, I know, the J curve is there, but it's not comfortable. And if it is comfortable, that's a problem. Like, you need to claw your way out of it.
Yeah. Gotta love investors for the pressure and accountability that they exert.
Yeah. Well, and actually it's funny that I love the setup of traditional search when it's done really well. And by that, I mean, I have an amazing board. It's a mix of, one larger search fund investor, one smaller search fund investor, and one industry person plus me. So there's 4 of us. The investor group trusts them, and like the communication to the investors is such that, like, really it's the board. And I don't get a lot of stuff from investors being like, oh my gosh, I'm worried about the J curve. because they're all aware of it and they know the board is on top of it.
Anything else to say about the experience? I'll volunteer one thing, and then I'll leave it to you, Cliff, to close us out. You had said that it is the business you thought it was, which is actually, you're an outlier there. The norm is sort of that it's not the business the searcher thinks it was when they bought it, and happily, in your case, it was.
Yeah, I would say it depends what level of detail you go to. Like the broad strokes of the big things that the traditional search investors want to check. Healthy growth, good margins, both at the EBITDA margin and gross profit margin level, good, sticky, predictable revenues overall, capital efficiency. I mean, we've got those. I would say, and we also did know going in that there was historically an underinvestment in, the platform side of it. That's business building though. So we expected that. I would say all the details or extent of that has been surprising. Like there's some areas where I look, I'm like, man, this is really held together with Scotch tape, and it's going to take a lot more to get it where we want it to go. But that I chalk that up probably to just experience, having this being my first time going through it. I think there's lots of businesses out there held together with Scotch tape.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, I think really the big message I would want searchers to take away from the conversation is, this journey, there's so much personal growth embedded in doing this that even if you're going to have it, it's going to be to a greater extent. Like I said, grit gets spoken about lots and lots for the searcher, but you've got to appreciate going in that it's more than just your grit that's involved. So I think if they take that away from it, then it's been a good interview.
And on that point, Cliff, is the actionable piece of advice here to just kind of over communicate what this journey could look like to your partner, sort of thing? Just get them on board and then get them on board again and then confirm that they're on board? 100%.
And all the prep that people advise searchers do before taking the leap, like listen to this podcast. They tell prospective searchers, go talk with 20, 30 plus people who've done it. The spouses probably should be involved in that. Maybe not 30 conversations, but to a similar extent.
Super, Cliff. Well, it's as we've already said, it's a really important point, the partner involvement in a search. So I thank you for really raising your hand and saying, let's have a conversation about that in particular. This has been really helpful, and it's going to be so rich to now hear from Christine in a separate one-on-one conversation. If people want to get in touch with you, sir, how can they do that? How do you like outreach to happen?
LinkedIn's probably the easiest. Cliff Nelson, PGS. I should be searchable.
Great. And of course, we'll link to that in the show notes. Cliff Nelson.
Yeah, sounds great.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Will.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Cliff. Now we'll hear from his wife, Christine, for her perspective on this whole journey. Christine Nelson, welcome to Acquiring Minds.
Thank you very much. I am very happy to be here. Thanks for having me as a guest.
Well, Christine, we've just heard from your husband, Cliff, about his experience acquiring PGS, getting over the finish line on his deal right as you were due, and then the first few weeks of Calvin, your son's life, coinciding with the first weeks of Cliff's transition into CEO of PGS. Mm-hmm. Now we'd like to hear your perspective on the aforementioned events as the partner of a searcher, and not just a partner, but a wife going through her first pregnancy at the same time. First, thank you for doing this, Christine.
Thank you. I'm very excited to share our story and our perspective. I think it's unique, and it's a good one to tell.
Great. Well, to start us off, let's go back to the first time you heard Cliff mention to you search funds, buying a business, and then proceed from there. When was that?
So Cliff and I met in 2017, and he was near the end of finishing his MBA, and he started talking about search right away. So it was clearly this thing that he had learned about in school, he was excited about, and truth be told, I thought he was just telling me something that was an interesting topic he learned in school every time he would talk about search. I wasn't quite clear that this was something he was interested in pursuing in the near future. And so I listened, but I didn't probe too much. I didn't ask too many questions about it in those earlier years when I first learned about it. And it wasn't until then we got married end of 2019. And near after we got married, he kind of sat me down and we had this serious conversation where he said, I would like to do a search fund. This is what I want to do. I'm ready to do this. And I kind of had I didn't. Sorry, I wasn't listening quite intently to what this means earlier. Please, let's rewind. Try to fill me in. What would this mean for you? What does this mean for me? We are married now. I feel like this is a partnership, a sort of journey. I was not opposed to it, but I was not quite clued into what exactly this would mean.
So his early mentions of it, and you not. It wasn't that you were apprehensive or like, oh God, I hope he doesn't do that. It was more just like, seemed like a topic among many that he brought home from school. And so
exactly,
you didn't inscribe it in your memory. Exactly.
Exactly.
And then when it got serious, you were like, okay, let me listen.
Yes. Well, anyone
really
that knows Cliff knows that he has lots of ideas and he has lots of passions. That's one of the things I love about him. So how was I to know that this was going to be the one that was exactly what he was going to do following that?
Okay. And so then when he was serious about it and you needed to train your attention on it, how'd you react? What did you think of the concept?
I was pretty critical, honestly, at the start. My initial response, and this is going to crack anyone up that is listening because you're very in tune to this, but mine was, this can't be real. You are making this up. What do you mean someone's just going to sell you their business? Who are you? Like, what makes you think you can do this? I did not understand that this was a well thought through process that had been proven, evaluated at multiple angles, was a real thing. So I thought he was kind of just blowing his horn saying, I think someone will sell me their business was honestly the reaction I had.
And then here you are. So how did your resistance begin to chip away?
Well, I've learned when I married him that I was going to experience a lot of things that I probably wouldn't have if I just, stayed a nice Midwest mentality and didn't branch out too much. So I knew that I was going to go on journeys with him. So I was excited. I was open to it. I knew we weren't going to stay in Chicago our whole life. We weren't going to live that exact life we were having when we got married. So I was open to this one as the option. I was like, okay, tell me more. This sounds good. I don't fully know what this means. And to his credit, neither did he, right? You can listen, you can read, you can talk to people as much as you want. Until you do it, you don't know what your experience is going to be. And we've definitely found that out as well for us. So I sort of just said, okay, like, let's do this. I don't know. It's going to, you tell me this is going to be probably a couple years out before any change really happens anyways. That'll be plenty of time for me to sort of figure this out, what I'm doing with this. Mm-hmm.
And you referred to Midwest mentality. So too did Cliff. Say more about what you mean.
Sure. For me, I think for many in the Midwest, we kind of grow up with the mentality of you follow those in front of you. So you go to school, you get a good job, something that's kind of familiar to people. You do really hard work. You kind of put your head down and work, and ultimately you'll end up retiring. You'll have a family. You'll have a really nice life, and you don't stray too far away from what is familiar and what is sort of seen around you.
And you think that this conservatism, or professional conservatism, is a Midwestern thing as opposed to, say, a small town thing? And we touched on this a little bit in the pre-call. I hadn't heard this stereotype about Midwesterners. Obviously, there's businesses that have been started up and down the Midwest. It's the manufacturing center of the country, sort of. I guess the kind of the Rust Belt was, but that includes large swaths of the Midwest. So clearly, there have been business people, and some of them, our most famous entrepreneurs historically were Midwesterners. So I'm just interested by this, that it's taken me this long in life to hear this stereotype of the Midwestern.
Sure. We may be wrong. It might be my puddle of the Midwest that this is sort of the exposure that I've been to or that I know. Cliff and I kind of both came when we didn't know each other growing up. We lived in different areas growing up, and we both kind of came in saying, this is a Midwest mindset. But there may be plenty of people listening that disagree, because you're right. There's obviously plenty of, you see everything everywhere in the country, including the Midwest.
Yeah. But regardless of that, of what the exact truth is there. Your truth, as it were, was that this was the culture of your town or your family, your own culture.
Yes.
So you would describe yourself at that time, probably still, as conservative when it comes to risk taking, professional risk taking.
Absolutely. Yep. I would. I've grown, I've learned a lot, but definitely that was how I was born and raised.
Okay. Okay. Well, pretty cool dynamic that, you trust your partner to take you on an adventure.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So you say you kind of listen to what he's really talking about, wrap your head around it, say, okay, let's do it. Where is the next important point in the story? I know Shreveport eventually happens. I want to hear your perspective on Shreveport, but is there something before that?
Yeah. Not a specific point, but a general comment as I was thinking about, the partner's perspective in all of this is something worth noting is that a lot of the journey that the searcher himself or herself goes through, the partner goes through in their own way. So getting overly excited or maybe overly apprehensive about any location, the timing that things are taking, et cetera. I felt too on my own journey because anytime he would bring up a new company idea, my first question was always, where is it? And he'd go, oh, I don't actually know. I'll have to go back and remember, because to him, it's more about the business he's jumping into. For me, it's where is it going to be? Because that's what my life is going to be, right? So we kind of had a little bit of an adjustment on that one too. You mentioned Shreveport as a specific one. That was Shreveport, Louisiana. Was a opportunity that he got pretty far on, so far that I actually came on one of the trips with him, one of the visits, because it looked like it was serious. And I am lucky that he wanted my viewpoint the whole time. And I said, I've never really seen myself living in that part of the country. I could be surprised. Let's go. I'm staying open-minded. I entered into this whole journey, saying I'll go where we go. You tell me this could only be a 5-year thing. I can do anything for 5 years, right? So I go with him, and absolutely no offense to Shreveport, it was a lovely place. It was not a place I wanted to live, and I spent the day at the hotel doing work while he was out meeting with the business owner and getting to know the job and this and that. And I'm researching what's around and starting to look at things and thinking, he's going to come back and he's going to tell me this was a fun trip, but no, this is not the business. And we had the exact opposite conversation that night at dinner, where he said, this could be it. I'm pretty excited. This seems like a very good opportunity. And I did not mean to at all, but I just immediately broke down in tears. And I said, I was not expecting this. Okay, I guess I'll wrap my head around it, but can I voice my concerns? Let's do, you told me this was going to be a partnership, so let me tell you how I'm feeling. And like I said, luckily for me, he was receptive to it. We talked a lot about it. I did tell him, I will come with you. I will do this. But gosh darn it, you better be absolutely certain about this one. We are not going to, I'm not taking a chance if you're kind of wishy-washy on this deal. So you better be pretty darn certain. And that was probably the biggest actual opportunity that we, had to work throughout his journey. I sort of mentioned earlier, I didn't expect to leave the Midwest. And so the fact that I knew I was going to be moving anywhere in the country was sort of something I was still wrapping my head around. And that was the sort of first big opportunity, was a place I had never expected myself to live. Was a little tough. And when you're the partner of the searcher, you're not in control. You're consulted, you're considered, but you're not in control. And so Cliff is able to see all of these really positive sides about the opportunity because it's his job opportunity. I see only what my life will be. And I have a career as well. And so with all of these opportunities, it's a question of, well, what could I do there? What would be my job there? Are there jobs for me to do? I work in the food industry. We are all around the country, but we're not everywhere in the country. So it's, that was always a big contender too on what will I have to do? Might I have to change careers, or at least, where I'm working specifically based on where we go.
This question of moving is most relevant to traditional search funds, the model that Cliff did,
Sure.
where you're kind of expected, and many traditional searchers will go anywhere where they can find the right opportunity, or almost anywhere. Many of my guests who don't do that model, they do a self-funded model or other models, don't do that and have the liberty or choose the path that enables them to stay put, or really be selective about where they buy a business, which is typically local to where they already are.
Sure.
So in some ways, this piece of your story, which for you, partner, is one of the biggest questions of all, this where you're going to live thing, is not going to be relevant to a ton of searchers because they're not doing traditional searches.
Fair enough.
But not to take anything away from it. It's just to call it out, because it is such a key part of this experience for the both of you. But the other thing, in some ways too, this piece is also not specific to search. In any couple where partner A gets some incredible professional opportunity and it means moving the family, and partner B kind of follows, this tension arises. So in some ways, this is a pattern separate from search itself.
Sure.
But anyway, now after Shreveport, did you say kind of, okay, maybe we need to set some boundaries on where we'll live? Like, it's not just going to be anywhere. I'm not going to move to like the little tip of Alaska sort of thing.
You would think, but not really. No, I think that one helped Cliff understand, both of us, honestly, to understand how would we really react to this idea of moving anywhere. But we, from my perspective, we had the conversation up front when he agreed to this, and the whole way through the process this is the deal, exactly to what you had said earlier. This happens to people all the time. You got a good opportunity, you move with your spouse. We're married. I'm going to come with you. I'll make the best of any situation. That is what it is. So no, he really didn't shift how he considered looking for anything. And, but I just remained, true to how I felt, because that's the best I can do, is at least be honest in how I'm feeling about it throughout it.
Great, Christine. Thank you. The other thing that you had said that I want to call out is how you kind of got familiar with what he was doing purely because of the physical constraints imposed on you by COVID and your proximity to to him, and therefore all the calls that he was on. Say that. Tell us about that, because I feel like, I don't know if there's a learning there, but it is kind of it was an important feature of. Tell us what it is first.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm sure Cliff touched on the details, but essentially he started his search journey, and then COVID happened and the shutdowns happened, and we all went to working from home. And so my job did too, his job as well. We were living in a 1-bedroom apartment downtown Chicago. We were very close to each other at all times. We could hear each other's meetings, right? Not unique to many couples in that situation. But for me, that was very beneficial, because I got to hear his entire fundraising journey firsthand. I could hear his calls. I got to hear him reaching out to all of the companies and what those conversations sounded like. I joke that not too far into his process, I could probably give his spiel. Like I knew it pretty well. I heard it so many times. And that was really helpful then for both of us, because he would have, let's say he would have a good call and he could pop into my side of the room and tell me about it, or a bad call and he could tell me about it. Like I was his first point of contact that he would debrief on all of his calls with. So that was really beneficial, I think, for both of us, that I could completely understand what he was doing, what this job was, what the journey was, and
it was beneficial because it just kind of educated on you on really what this thing is, less vague, more, or did it also, or maybe did you respect it more? Was it like, wow, that sounds like a hard thing to do, or what? Like, what was your? Yes,
I definitely did respect it more, and I do not mean to come across that I disrespected this process by any means. But yes, I did. And I got to. It was a very cool thing to see from your partner. You guys know each other in your personal relationships, but we didn't work together. We don't know each other from work. So I don't know who he is when he works, but I got to learn that. And I got to see how he, presents himself and, hear what these kind of conversations are. And I'm always inspired by him. And, that really continued. And I think we just built a lot of respect for each other by me being there on this journey with him. And he, being able to show me and be vulnerable about what was tough. He didn't have to come home and then tell me about his day. Like if he was feeling rough or very excited, I was right there. You couldn't hide any of it from me. So it did give me a lot of respect for the amount of work that all of you go through to do this. It's tough. It's very tough, but so it was very nice to see it firsthand. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. And next point in the story is what? You being pregnant. Take us forward.
Yeah. I'll back up just one step of that is, we got married when he started this, and we decided, we have to start a family. It was a very big conversation the whole time of, do we wait until you finished your search or do we start it now? And ultimately came up to, don't let search stop living your life. We want to have a family. Let's have a family. Let's figure out how to do this. We'll figure it out, I guess, whatever the timing is. And I can fast forward, honestly, through to the tough stuff where, we talked through every option and said, well, worst case scenario is I'm going to have the baby when you close the search. And unfortunately for us, that's exactly what happened, as I'm sure Cliff walked you through those steps already. So I'm happy to kind of step it through from my side.
From your side, please. Yeah. What was that? So, right. So you guys... In your timing of it, it was like, we're going to proceed with our family. We don't want to stop the most important thing for a search. And the chances that, Cliff finds and is closing on the business right as the baby comes are slim to none. Yeah. So, and then in fact, that's exactly what happened. So maybe from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So from my perspective, I know the baby's coming, right? You get pregnant, you have a due date, you know when the baby's going to be here. But from his journey with finding this company, some days it was this was going to fall apart. Some days it was, no, this is it, and we're going to close in a month. And then it was, no, it's going to be delayed 3 months. Like the whole closing process just kept getting sort of later and later and closer to the due date, closer to the due date, closer to the due date, until it was basically neck and neck. And gosh, that was tough. Being the one that was pregnant, any of you listeners have been or have, a partner who has been pregnant, you understand that, women want to nest. That's what we do when we're pregnant. And so I felt like it was a very tough pregnancy because I couldn't do a lot of things that naturally my body was telling me to do. Let's start up a nursery. Let's buy a house. Let's put down roots because this baby is coming and I am a first-time mom. I don't know what I'm doing, but let's try to create the right space. And we really couldn't. We ended up making. Our apartment by the time the baby was born it was a mess. It was a disaster. There was a bassinet in the corner, and we were using our stroller as a bassinet because there was no room to buy the right equipment because we thought we were going to be moving. And I said this in our pre-call, like, the baby's coming, but you don't know that the deal is done until the deal is done. And so we really didn't want to. We talked about buying a house in Chicago and just saying, well, if the deal closes, we'll just rent out the house. And, we talked about all these other options, and we actually got pretty close to doing that. And ultimately said, no, let's just stay here. We're going to stay in this small space. It's because we're probably going to move to Maryland soon after the baby's here. So, Cliff's busy thinking about the business, and I'm sitting here thinking about the baby and just looking around and thinking, this isn't right. None of this is right. This is not what I planned. This is not the space I intended. It's out of my control. There's nothing I can do to make it better except just take it every day and know that we're going to be okay. Just kind of had to keep saying that every day.
And so how kind of bad emotionally did that part get? That part before the baby came? Before the baby came.
It became pretty tough. I ended up just internalizing it, I think, a lot because I knew this was it. There was no other option. This is the life we're living. It was sort of every time I talked to someone, how are you doing? What's the plan? This and that. And it got to a point where I'm just like, just stop asking me this. The plan is we're going to have a baby. We'll figure everything else out. I don't know. I cannot, I've got nothing. It was just like eye on the prize of what's going to happen and when is this all going to time out. I will say another struggle with this too is that I wasn't sure what to do about my job. So I was about like, will I hit maternity leave while we are will the baby come and I'll be in maternity leave when we move, or are we going to have to move before the baby comes? And I haven't told work because it may not happen, right? So I've got a lot of logistics side on my side going through that. Just kind of every day, taking it day by day, trying to figure out how to get through it. So yeah, it was getting pretty tough.
Okay, so the baby comes, and tell us what that experience is like, kind of the delivery and the immediate aftermath.
Sure, the baby comes. So Cliff closes on a Friday, November 4th. I'm induced November 8th. Long induction, baby comes November 9th. And we are both in the hospital exhausted for many different reasons. And Cliff's jumping onto calls because he is 3 days into this business. And here I am trying to figure out like how to nurse and how to sleep and what to do with the baby. And he's like, I got to jump out. I'm going to go jump on a call. No resentment, nothing like that. We talked about that this is probably what's going to happen. But, we just kind of kept looking at each other like, I can't believe this is our reality right now. How did we find ourselves in this situation? But okay, here we go. Let's just get through this. So, baby was born. Luckily for me, baby was healthy. I was healthy. We are able to get home. We go home, and by that next week, Cliff is traveling to Maryland and back to start seeing the business for short trips, right? I think he went overnight once, maybe twice. I don't even remember. And as a new mom, I needed help. And so I was, having some of my family come in. My family's mostly up in Wisconsin. So my sister came once, my mom came once, having help come down for those times that he's gone, just so I'm not alone, because it's tough, first time mom, yeah. The emotions are strong. And I feel like I need to be, I feel like I need to be the sole parent at this point. And that sounds harsh. And I think Cliff would say the same, but he had 2 babies at that point, and I had 1. And so I knew that like Calvin had to be my focus. And I would tap into him as much as I can, but know that he's really being pulled in 2 directions. And it was really tough, very emotional for sure.
And despite the fact that you guys had agreed that, this is an unpredictable adventure and stuff is going to happen and we're going to have to push through it. And then you find yourself in this situation. Okay, this is one of those moments where we're going to have to push through. Mm-hmm. Was there not, you said no resentment. That would be the word to ask about. Despite the fact that your intellect was telling you that wouldn't be fair, was there part of you that was feeling it anyway?
I don't think fair.
Sorry, Christine, but one thing because just remembering the immediate aftermath of a birth, in my 2 cases, like, and everything I learned about that process and what it's like for couples and stuff, like there's also a pattern where mothers resent fathers just anyway, because mothers are going through this incredible, hard, difficult thing, and the fathers aren't. And no matter how helpful the father tries to be, it's like he's not really suffering any of this. And so there's just some natural resentment that can surface anyway, let alone if the whole variable of the search also happening at the same time.
Sure. No, you're absolutely right. I never thought of it as resentment, what I was feeling. I was very frustrated, very upset. But I'm jealous in a way that what he was going through was really, really tough. But I was physically recovering and mentally recovering, and the hormones were crazy, and I wasn't on any sleep. In my head, I was in the worst case scenario. I was the worse off person of the 2 of us. So, I was frustrated. I was upset. I never thought of it as resentful. Maybe it was, but feeling a lot of other emotions. To his credit, he did the best that he could, right? And it's easy to say looking back, we're now over 2 years out of it. I'm certain I probably felt different. But he definitely did the best that he could.
Yeah. So now a week or so later, the back and
Yeah.
forth from Maryland is not
hard.
good.
Yes. Yeah. So the plan was always we would wait till the new year. Baby was born November. We would wait. We'd get through the new year, and then we'd move out to Maryland. Cliff's doing the back and forth, and he comes home from one of these and says, I can't do this anymore. You seem to be healing. Calvin seems to be doing fine. After Thanksgiving, we're out of here. We got to go. That was a little harsh. He did ask it as a question, but basically it was very much implied, like, please, we have to go for my sake. I can't be with you and be with this company. The only way for me to even try to do both is for us to physically be in Maryland. And I understood that. I knew what he was saying. But I pushed back on that so hard. This was that first time we had that conversation was one of the first, like, this is not what we talked about. So many things have already gone not according to plan, but we talked about getting through the new year. I had, family was going to come and visit and help. I was going to try to see some friends before we left, before we, went to a new part of the country. I wanted to pack up the apartment. I wanted to figure out how to be a mom for more than 3 weeks. Like, I had plans to do before we moved. And so for Cliff to say, we got to go, this is not working for me. I understood it. I got it. Ultimately is what we did. But that was probably the first time I really pushed back and said, no, we can't do it. But I understood. So we made the plan to do it. The plan was going to be, let's leave after Thanksgiving. We'll get through Thanksgiving. We'll drive up to Wisconsin. We'll see both of our families. And then we'll come home. And basically 2 or 3 days later, we would get movers to pack up the place and out we would go. We would drive to Maryland. And then it was somewhere along in that journey that I got mastitis, which is an infection that you could get if you're breastfeeding. I got mastitis. I went to the doctor. They put me on antibiotics, and it started healing. By the way, mastitis is the worst sickness I've ever had in my life.
Wow.
The worst. I was the worst fever I've ever seen. My mom was there with me at the time because, of course, this happened when Cliff was traveling. So my mom was there and was probably not the best person to be there because poor mother looking at her daughter, I was highest fever I've ever seen. I was physically shaking. I could not calm down. And thank goodness my mom was there because I could not take care of my baby. For 24 hours, I could not do anything but lay down and sleep. It was awful, just to set the tone of how bad I got sick.
Wow.
So I got on antibiotics that did clear up the mastitis. And then right once those antibiotics were done, I got mastitis again, which is pretty rare, unfortunately. So I went to the doctor, got mastitis again. They put me on antibiotics, and pretty quickly those antibiotics then I reacted to, and I got full body hives. And this is again while Cliff is traveling into Maryland. My sister is with me at this time. And so I call the doctor. Doctor says, it's got to be a reaction to the antibiotics you're on. Here's what we're going to do, switch me to new ones. And she told me, which stuck in my head and scared me at the time, was if this doesn't clear up in 24 hours, you have to go to the ER. And so I'm like, we can't move. We're supposed to move in 2 days. Doctors tell me I have to go to the ER. I am that sick. We can't do this. And my sister's with me and she's telling me too, like, you can't go. This is crazy. You can't go. Look around. Nothing's ready. This is ridiculous. What are you doing? So I forget if I had to call him or if he came home. Those details are so fuzzy, but basically we talked through this and I told him, I said, Cliff, I'm not going. Doctor told me I can't go. And you said we are only moving if I am healthy and the baby's healthy, and I am not healthy. So that's that. And we talked through it, and he said, well, what you told me is that the doctor said that, within 24 hours, if this clears up, you're okay. So I'm going to hold on to the hope that within 24 hours, this clears up. And if that's the case, sounds like you're healthy. I'm like, I guess you're right. Okay. So this is how much we're each trying to, win this argument, dare I say. He needs to go. I need to stay. And ultimately, thank goodness, I do clear up. I do get better. That next 24 hours, I'm totally fine. So plan is back on. And we get the movers on as scheduled, and we drive out to Maryland. And that's that. And I cry almost the whole way. It is not the exit from Chicago that I expected.
Which is the only place you grew up in Wisconsin, but then the only place after college you'd lived.
Correct.
And it was really home.
Correct. Exactly. It was home.
How long did you live there?
I lived there almost 10 years.
Yeah.
So, and I loved it. It was where I felt like I started growing as my own individual and as a person. So it was a big place for me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so you guys couldn't do a goodbye party sort of thing.
Exactly. And it wasn't even, I don't need to throw a party. It was, I don't even think I told my friends because it happened so fast. And I'm a new mom and everything else is going on that I think I texted one or two people saying, but I also feel I'm a Midwest people pleaser. So I feel guilty not being able to give them the proper goodbye that they want. And so I sort of delayed the whole thing. And so it's true. I had said to Cliff, the only way that I can picture this right now is I feel like we are sneaking out in the dead of the night, just running away. And that's not what his experience was. He knew what we were going to. Everyone knew he had been, bought a business and we were moving to Maryland. That was not my life. I was just a new mom that everyone was worried about, sneaking away in the middle of the night. And we literally did. We left at sundown, drove all the way through. And like I said, I still look at the picture that we took, like the last picture in our apartment, and I get choked up. Like I still cry thinking about just that silent exit that we had leaving our city.
Yeah, that would be so hard. Christine, I don't want to just kind of be dark, but because I think it's frankly the hardship here is the important part of the story. How tense did it become between the two of you?
We have a very, kind relationship is maybe the right thing to say. Things
Midwest again.
Midwest. We're Midwest nice, exactly. We don't yell at each other, anything like that. But those few weeks was probably some of the most tense it's ever been, and that just the things that we both had to say to each other. He had to say, "I can't do this anymore." To that being living in two places, being in Maryland, being in Chicago. Him saying, "I can't do that." To a woman who he is married to and just had his child, and he knows is going through all of the, everything that I'm going through. And for me to say back, like, I can't do what you are asking. Like it was definitely the most difficult time we've ever gone through. The positive way, you said I don't want to only speak dark. The positive thing about it is, and why I think why I really enjoy our relationship is we were able to have real conversations about it, and not really feel resentment towards each other. Just be able to express how we're feeling, cry to each other, feel the sadness, feel the emotions, and talk each other through it, through what we're both doing. So it was the toughest part, but we've come out very strong after going through a situation like that. How
does the move go, Christine? We're going to start wrapping up here, but let's hear so much of this has been the where the heck are we going to land? Then you learn it's going to be Maryland, but it's still this kind of unknown. What's it like when you get there? How's it been?
So we like I said, we drove through the night. We left about 4 p.m. We drove through the night. We stopped at the restaurants. Calvin was a champ. On the 3-hour dot, he woke up to feed. We'd pull over at the truck stops, and I would feed him, change his diaper, give him a little bouncing time or whatever. While Cliff would sit in the front seat and close his eyes and take a 15-minute nap, so we could get back on the road and keep doing this. So we quite literally drove through the night. 5 a.m. we roll into our new apartment that Cliff has seen. He went and signed on one of his journeys, kind of a, hey, we're home, it's dark. I can't really see anything. So the intro to moving to Columbia, Maryland was anticlimactic at best. And then we get there and we spend the weekend, and Cliff, to his credit, is so excited to move to Maryland. And so he's like, we're here. Let's do some things. Let's drive into Baltimore. Let's go get some crabs. Let's do this and that. And I'm just emotionally not there. I'm like, we don't have furniture. The movers aren't going to be here for 2 weeks or something. We have an air mattress. I'm not going places. Like, what do you want to do? He pushed us in the car. We drove around. So we had kind of a fun first weekend of getting to know the city. But then it starts. Then the work starts. On Monday, he starts going to work every day. And, he's getting up at 5 a.m. to leave to go into the office so he can work before everyone gets there. And, I'm waking up at 5 a.m. with the baby anyways. And then I'm home all day in a new city that I don't know anyone, don't have any family, have never been. went for one quick weekend trip with him, but don't really know anything about, and a brand new baby. And so it got a little tough. Some positive things about it is we have wonderful family and a wonderful support system. So almost for the first month, we had quite a bit of family rolling through, and they would come and help me and stay with us. I felt awful because they were staying with us and we still didn't have our furniture. So we could offer them an air mattress and a patio chair. And that was about it. It was ridiculous. And that was kind of how it was then for the furniture came. But then for the next few months, Cliff's gone 12 plus hours a day. Me and the baby just trying to figure out what to do alone in a city that we don't know.
And so how do you digest that? What's your emotional state like at that point? Are you like, WTF? Or are you like, well, this is part of the adventure? What is it?
More WTF than part of the adventure. I was pretty low. I got a little bit depressed. Postpartum is a thing also. So luckily, I was able to check in with myself, and I got myself a therapist. That was very helpful. I did that pretty quick. Started talking to someone, and then I found a way to start meeting friends and getting to know people in the community. So I joined an app for moms. That got me also hooked up with a workout group for moms in the area. So the first 3 months that we were out there, I had a 6-month maternity leave. I was extremely lucky. The first 3 months of those were kind of tough because I'm starting to, get adjusted and everything we were just talking about. But then the last 3 months were pretty awesome because I'd started to make some friends, and it's, me and the baby taking on Columbia, Maryland. And, we didn't see much of Cliff, we didn't see much of Dad, but we had a pretty good time, honestly. So I kind of reflected it in two parts, or see that, that first break in two parts. But yeah, it was definitely tough at the start. Thankful for family that came and helped. Thankful for getting some friends quickly that got me through it. But otherwise, just sitting in an apartment with a brand new baby, being pretty sad.
Christine, you told us about when you were cooped up in COVID and listening to his calls in your little 1-bedroom in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, with Calvin, with the baby and all that you've been through, is he still talking to you about the search, or what is now the CEO, his CEO-ship, or are those conversations kind of come to an end because you've got other things on the brain at this point?
That's a very good question. It didn't come to an end, but it definitely decreased a lot more. He would still tell me, it's hard to come home and not talk about your job, but I did get a lot more from him at that point, the response of, I don't want to talk about it. It was a long day. Like, I just can't talk about it. Which I understand and can respect that, you don't want to sit back and rehash it all. So yes, we went from being near each other and seeing the whole process together to a little bit more siloed. And it's okay. That's kind of a little bit more normal. But yeah, I feel like I know a lot more about his search than I maybe do and did know about the start of him starting at the company.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? I want to ask you to kind of reflect now, because we're 2 years or 18 months to 2 years away from all of this now. So I want to have you reflect on it and where you think you've landed. But anything else on the plot itself before we get there?
I think we hit the key things of the plot.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite a journey.
Okay. So now how do you think about all this?
Yeah, that's one that Cliff's asked me too. He's asked me if would I go back and do it again? And I definitely don't want to repeat what we did. I wouldn't live through it again. But I'm honestly extremely thankful that we did it. It got us to a really good place. Like you said, it's been over 2 years now that we've been here. We're very happy where we are. I've landed a great job too. We have a house now. We've had a second child. Life is pretty good, and we wouldn't be in this exact spot without going through this journey. So that's pretty great. But for me on the personal side, I am a different person than I was in 2019 when we started this. I'm a lot stronger. I can deal with ambiguity and change and risk a lot more. And those are things that I'm proud of. Like it was Cliff's journey, but I benefited a lot from it too. And I hope that other spouses can feel the same way or have a similar experience. And I don't think that I would be exactly who I am right now if we didn't go through this. If we didn't have all the challenges that we did, if I didn't understand completely what being an entrepreneur really was firsthand, I wouldn't have appreciated it as much. And I really do. I respect it. I completely appreciate it. I got a little bit of itch myself coming up now, seeing him go through it a bit too. So,
you have an
I'm
itch
thankful.
yourself?
I do.
Nice. No, that's great. Well, and I'll tell you, Christine, whether or not you have an actual itch to be an actual entrepreneur, Cliff characterizes you and partners of searchers as entrepreneurs already. That this journey that you've kind of gone on the journey to a parallel track, but certainly on the track. Okay, maybe not the explicit business piece of it, but as he said, this is such this journey is so intertwined with the personal life that that obviously all of the personal bits are really kind of affecting you just as much.
Yeah.
You were going to add something?
No, I was just saying, I'm glad to hear him say it like that, because I do agree, being that person.
Well, it's wonderful to hear that you feel like you've grown and that this has been positive for you. Two final questions. One about money. So I presume, you'll correct me, that your reason for supporting him in this is because he's your partner, and you kind of have a philosophical belief that that's the role that you each should play for the other. It's just to support the other's ambitions. But this path is also about making money, and potentially a lot of it, and potentially younger than most people come into money. Most people never come into money. Is any of your are any of your like your ultimate assessment on this whole journey, do you think will be tied to whether or not he's successful and you guys jump from middle class to upper middle class or beyond? Or are you not thinking about it in like material wealth terms, really?
That's a really good question. We talk about how our financial situation of the outcome of this could be frequently. And he gives me the numbers, and, we lay out what it could look like, what are different options. And it's one of those things that, quite honestly, I hear, I listen to, and I assume the worst. And I say, you know what, if we come out not in a better financial situation, we still have a really good life. We're still doing really good. And that kind of goes to with, we won't come out in a worse financial situation, which is a very nice thing about this sort of process. So to me, it's not about the money. It would be great if we do find ourselves coming out pretty, doing pretty well on that side. But quite honestly, I see the success of this being a lot more of, who does Cliff come out as? And is he proud of the work that he did? And does it step him up to what he wants to do next in the appropriate way? To your point, we are young. We do have a lot of career left. This is not the last thing he is going to do. And if he comes out feeling like, I learned a lot, these are my new skills, and now I'm excited to go and do X, and he goes and crushes that and is happy and fulfilled, like that's what I want in a partner. We're already doing okay financially. I'm not doing this for the big financial win, I guess. I'm just excited who it makes my partner to be.
That's beautiful. Great answer. And actually, one more question. I can't let you go without answering this, Christine, because this one will be very relevant to people. We've only glanced off the fact of your job. You did say directly, like, moving is also going to be like, what am I going to do job wise? But let's hear like how a little bit, give us some detail on how you thought about that and how you've handled it, because that's a big one.
Yeah, definitely. So I've got a career I'm very proud of. I'm a product developer in the food industry. So I'm a food scientist by my undergrad degree. And like I said earlier, we don't have jobs everywhere. We don't have companies everywhere. Chicago is a huge hub for food companies, actually. And that is why it was a great place to be. I had lots of different options should I want to stay there my whole life. Out here in this area, there's a couple great companies. I've landed myself in a really good position. And I we talked about this in our intro call of whether it was luck or the result of hard work. But for me, I feel very fortunate that I was able to find a position that's exactly what I'm skilled for and interested in doing in the Baltimore area that timed up exactly when my maternity leave was ending. And I was able to make that jump. So I did come out of this feeling very confident and very successful in what I am doing in my own career as well. But that was absolutely one of the top concerns I had along the whole search phase was, what will I do? Will I have a job out of this? Will I have to take some time off? Will I have a gap on my resume? As I get out and try, as we get to wherever we're going, and I have to look for something else. So I do feel really lucky that for me, I went from something that I really liked and have been able to stick with something that I really like out in the area that we are.
Would you have been prepared to, you just mentioned gap, so I guess you were prepared to maybe not find a job and stop working for a while. Was that the plan if you had landed here, Maryland, or somewhere else where Cliff might have bought a company and not found something?
It was a consideration.
What would you do?
Yeah, it was a consideration for sure. And that sort of positively lined up with having a brand new baby is, okay, well, I'll just stay home for a year or whatever, and I'll take care of the baby. Because the thing we haven't really mentioned too much too is that with us both working, we had to find daycare. And, that's always a pretty long waiting list. So add that to the grand scheme of logistics that we had to do coming out here too. So that was probably the top thing I would have done, is just stayed home for a while and figured out exactly what I want to do wherever we are.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay, great. Okay, Christine. Well, you've given us so much. This is really, thank you again for coming on. I know this is a very personal story for you. Is there anything that we didn't hit on, or any last thought that you want to leave us with, or piece of very direct advice you want to give to people other than everything you've already shared?
Sure. Yeah, I think the one thing, if I could, share to anyone listening here, is that if you are the searcher, just remember that your partner is on this journey as well. And I'm certain most of you probably are. I was very lucky that my partner was very in tune with that. But have a little empathy for what they're going through and try to help them be a part of the process. It came naturally to us, and I really enjoyed it, and I benefited a lot from it. So it's sort of the reminder to the searchers that, this isn't a solo thing that you're doing. Even if you're not moving across the country, it's still a big thing you're going through, and try to do what you can to keep the partner involved. And if you're the partner and you're you're finding that this is tricky, I hope that you also end up being proud of the position that you end up in, and, find the good things about going through it, and, lean into that entrepreneurial spirit that your partner is going to, because that helped me a lot for sure, is just sort of acting like I am one myself. And that gets you through those ambiguous states. And it's, once they land it and the search is done, well, a whole new journey begins, but, hopefully a little bit more stability and consistency comes with that as well.
And maybe you'll catch the bug even, which it sounds like you might have a little bit. And Christine, would you be open to people reaching out? Probably. I would imagine it would be partners, if anybody. Could be wrong. Would you be open to conversations if they wanted to connect with you?
Yes, absolutely. Please reach out if you would like to talk about anything. I'm happy to help.
And do you like LinkedIn or direct to email? What do you like?
LinkedIn sounds great. You can find me on LinkedIn, Christine Nelson. I'm sure you send out the contact information. Perfect.
We'll include it. Christine Nelson, thank you very much. This has been great.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. Make sure you subscribe to the Acquiring Minds channel below. We are now publishing twice a week, so tons of new interviews and stories to come. Stories that will help you along your own path to acquiring a business.